Hello, hello, hello. Nice to meet you guys. I appreciate the positivity. I know it has to be, you guys have to really care to be here because, environmental work is a little different than the stuff that we're fans. So I'm not a former basketball player, by the way. I still play. I get this all the time. I do a lot of activist work and, players look at me like, are you still playing? And I'm just like, no, I do play. Right now I'm currently in China though, so I'll be going to China in like 2 months. But I want to,
All right.
yeah. Make sure you get it right, man. Yeah,
Keep me posted.
yeah, for sure. But I want to introduce Liz, but just so you guys know, I'm still learning the environmental advocacy. I was present in a lot of George Floyd protests, and long story short, I was when I first came out and got into environmental justice, I did not get a good reaction from different people. It was almost like they were saying that I was fanning the flames of what was already out there. But I'm like, geez, we've already been fanning the flames of like gun violence and, the police brutality and all these other things. So it's kind of cool to meet a different group, which you're about to meet. But, personally, I've, dedicated myself and family to water pollution and genetically modified organisms in the food, in which, I've started business named Stoked. The more questions I had, the more places I looked for answers. So, and that's where my allies with the Hip Hop Caucuses came. So with that being said, the Hip Hop Caucus has taught me so much about the subjects, but today it's all about environment and how it affects the Black and Indigenous communities that I grew up in. And who better is that to chat than the executive director of the Hip Hop Caucus. So Liz, please come out whenever you get a chance. She's such an incredible leader. She's been there for 14 years. And I have so much respect for these guys because in this world, in this day and age, it's like an internet thing, it's the Black Lives Matter movement, in my opinion, these thoughts are my own, but it has become so internet-ish, if that's a word, where the Hip Hop Caucus, on the other end, they're like freaking street soldiers. So I joined this group when my community was struggling with the Bahalia Pipeline connection, and I'll let her explain more, but let me just start off by asking Liz, why did you join the Hip Hop Caucus? And how has it been, 14 years as an executive director?
Absolutely. Should we sit down?
Yeah,
Let's sit down.
Where are you sitting? Where are you sitting?
I'll sit here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, we didn't plan this. We just kind of showed up. So,
Thank you, Jarnell. And
Sure.
it's great to be here and appreciate everyone sticking around for a full day of amazing conversations. I joined Hip Hop Caucus in 2006. So our organization started as a movement in 2004 with the Vote or Die campaign that Diddy did and a set of other hip hop oriented voter engagement efforts in the 2004 election. And Hip Hop Caucus was really created to carry the work forward of mobilizing voters, but also really build out a grassroots infrastructure and an agenda that we fight for day in, day out between elections. And we work on civil and human rights issues, democracy, voting rights issues, economic justice issues, and climate and environmental justice. And it was really actually Katrina that propelled our work into that area in 2005, 16 years to the day on Sunday.
Yeah.
Our
we missed that event, right? It was supposed to be there on Sunday.
we were going to go, right?
Yeah.
So we do an annual Katrina Commemoration. We've done our Gulf Coast Renewal campaign fought for a just recovery, accountability, and justice post-Katrina. And this year's was canceled because of Hurricane Ida. So we can talk more about that as well. But it was really being on the front lines of justice post-Katrina that showed Hip Hop Caucus as a civil and human rights organization for this century, as a racial justice organization. We need to be fighting on climate and environmental justice because all that's going to keep happening is more extreme weather, more drought, more food shortage, more fires, all these sorts of things that we're seeing now today. And the folks that get left behind, those who are impacted first and worst, are communities of color and poor folks. And the environmental movement for so long has a legacy of white supremacy and has been centered in a framework that has been driven by white leadership. And that is while environmental justice communities, while communities of color have been fighting on these issues without visibility for decades. So at Hip Hop Caucus, that's the work that we do to recenter the environmental movement in a justice framework in the communities that are first and worst impacted.
Nice. That's well said. That's great. I think we have introduce a video, the water project. Is that up next?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
So one of the areas of work that we do on climate and environmental justice is storytelling, narrative, and power building, and by recentering the narrative on climate. And we've spent 3 years working on a story in the Hampton Roads region of Virginia, which is facing rising sea levels, is actually below sea level, sinking, and facing rising sea levels. And under the previous administration, the only project that the local government could get funding for to deal with climate impacts was to basically redevelop the Black public housing community in Norfolk, Virginia. And so it's a climate gentrification story, which is the threat that we're facing in our climate solutions. Are our climate solutions going to be solutions that get us to a more just world? Or are they ultimately going to be solutions that just reaffirm the status quo and reaffirm the powers that currently exist? So I was going to share a few-minute clip from the documentary. There's 2 parts to this storytelling. We have a documentary, but we also did a stand-up comedy special because we also wanted to challenge ourselves and figure out how do we make the climate crisis funny, right? Because we got to build movements, and to do that, we need joy, resilience, culture, more than just the doom and gloom. So first, a quick 3-minute trailer of underwater projects.
I am originally from Louisiana. All right now, I like that. When Katrina hit New Orleans, 1,833 people lost their lives. Now, if you can go to a place that if they were hit by a Category 1 storm, it would have more disastrous effects. I said, well, where is that place? I'll be there. They said the Hampton Roads, Norfolk area.
A rock from space slammed into what is now Virginia, and besides really ruining the days of a couple of dinosaurs, it also left an intense crater, which made the water around what is now Norfolk deep.
There's probably not another locality that's facing the challenges and the threats around water.
I'm not trying to see my area on the news talking about body counts and we can't find this person, we can't find these people.
The naval base in Norfolk equates for the largest percentage of any industry. There's also the Langley Air Force Base, NASA.
But all this military infrastructure is going underwater. The government must be working on fixing this show, right? No, my friends.
The flood wall stops where the public housing area begins.
St. Paul's, like many public housing communities around the country, is more prone to climate flooding than the rest of the city, further complicating the question of what to do about public housing and families who need housing support.
So you're looking at multiple billions of dollars to try to build a living with water situation.
Got to rebuild it back in a way that lives with the water.
So they offer Section 8 vouchers and things like that to get people to move other places.
People are running out of places to go.
Hold up, how are we the ones being hurt the worst by a climate crisis that we contribute to the least?
We used to mainly smell car fumes, and we didn't smell them anymore because we were growing things.
You spend your life in trying to transform it so that privileged people can then just push you right out? My God.
It's a long process. It's like you say, it takes a whole village.
We understand that this is an issue that affects us more than everybody else.
Climate justice and environmental justice, all of it is centered on racial justice.
We don't have any other choice but to figure this out for our future.
Yes, you're in harm's way, but yes, you can be the solution to the rest of the country and the world to fix this climate crisis.
So that's a trailer for a documentary film. We're finalizing production on it now, and it'll be done by the end of the year. But as part of a long-term organizing project in Hampton Roads about building power, we're actually mobilizing voters right now on climate justice for their local statewide elections there this November. And one of the things we did around engaging communities on the threats that the climate crisis is having presently and potentially was a stand-up comedy special at the Addicts Theater in that same community in St. Paul's that you saw on the clip. And we brought comedians from around the country and some local comedians and did a stand-up show as an act of resistance and resilience, where joy and resilience is part of movement building. And we did it at the Addicts Theater, which is a theater on the Chitlin Circuit. It was built in the early 1900s, and everyone from Rev Fox to Cal Calloway all performed at this theater, and it's at the heart of this public housing community. So just a quick 1-minute clip from that stand-up comedy special.
Nice.
Bringing kids in this world is scary. I'm thinking about buying my boys a kayak, you know? Can you imagine somebody taking a kayak to a shop and go? That's stupid.
And I want to tell you just a report from these white climate crisis rooms, what they worry about. Straws, sea turtles, black people. It's not a good order.
I went to Howard, so I made my decision and stuck to it, okay? I just want to brag, though. Howard had a swim team. Y'all might want to get on top of that.
I'm already crying. Then the police there. I'm calming down. Police walking. They too used to shoots, man. They walk me out to the car. They like, hey, was it right here? I'm like, they still in the area. Why are you trying to get me to Takashi myself?
So I braid hair, too. Anybody where the black women at in here? I feel a little self-conscious for saying it and my hair not braided, because people like, oh, you braid hair, do you?
A lot of beautiful black women in here, nice hair, but you gotta watch those sea levels. If it get too high, everybody gonna have to go natural.
So
Yeah, that's cool.
So that's a little bit of the storytelling work, but then we also do a lot of organizing work, right? As Jarnell referenced. So you want to talk to us about kind of how you came to Hop Caucus, how you came to environmental justice, and the first fight you joined in your hometown of Memphis?
Yeah, the Bahalia Pipeline connection. It was, Memphis is literally known, and I caught on to this as I got older. Memphis is known for its water, its agriculture. It gets all its water out of this one aquifer, which is rare amongst other cities and states because it's pure, it's pre-plastic, it's number one municipality. I hope I said that right. So with that being said, and just being a traveler, I played with the Grizzlies. I played in the NBA 4 years. I would talk to other players, and no one wanted to come to Memphis. But then I, get into my entrepreneur journey, and I have a CBD brand in cannabis, so Memphis is like the spot for agriculture. I did not know how important it was. And then I met a guy named Justin Pearson who works at the MCAP. This guy is just freaking amazing. I ran into Reverend, who we saw up here on the board. But long story short, it kind of started for me at the George Floyd protests. You know, I would go to these protests and, you know, I show up and I'm like, wow, there's so many white people here. And it kind of, you know, blew my mind that, you know, at first I was thinking that this was a black versus white thing. It's really a good versus evil thing. And that was one of the first things that kind of shook me a little out of my, you know, Southern mindset, which, so just being there, you would look at different people and you see like, you know, we would protest and, you know, walk, but there wasn't any reprehensible plan. So for me, just already being a writer, I've you know, written TV shows and it's getting picked up, but at the same time, you know, I wrote a political script, which I felt like could help the people at the protest. And then just sharing that, I think Rev had already produced some scripts, right? So that's kind of how I ran into the Hip Hop Caucus. I felt like there was a common interest with being able to provide a reprehensible plan through a TV show, and then already being at these George Floyd protests and wanting to do more, just wondering like, what do we do from here? You know, what's next? So, and I think a lot of guys there were thinking that. So with that being said, it was a dream come true to be able to get the Hip Hop Caucus to produce the show, as well as, you know, I joined as a social justice campaign manager. And with that in mind, it pretty much led to the Bahalia Pipeline connection, in which it was Valero Energy had already handed out, you know, I'm from Memphis, so I had this connection with a bunch of people already in the land that were saying that they had received these checks from the Valero, I think it was Valero, right? Yeah, and in which I think it was like 10,000 here, you know, 15,000 here. My uncle, who took the check, pretty much, you know, I had a heart-to-heart with him, and that led me to then join the virtual summit, the We Shall Breathe, with the earthday.org community. And from there, it was the rest is history. I must say I'm attached to this company more than others. And Rev has a plan, like with the George Floyd. I went to Reverend and Liz and I asked them, what can we do more than just protesting? And he had like a 5-point plan. What is it, like education, protest? Do you know what it is? Oh, okay, but yeah, he has a pretty technical way to win these battles. It's not just going up and, you know, beating on your door or showing up at the politician house, you know. So I thought that was so cool. You know, I just didn't think that was possible in an era where everything is online, and it kind of rejuvenated my spirit as far as being into you know, social justice. So I'm still learning about environmental justice, and you know, you could just tell. You drive by and you smell certain things when you go in this neighborhood, and then you go out in Germantown, which is, you know, the majority white neighborhood, and it just smells so beautiful. So I mean, you literally you learn these things as you get older, and you don't know how much it affects the human. So I have, you know, my entire family has either cancer or diabetes. And I've started a Stokes brand to, you know, my last name is Stokes, but it's more so, it holds dear and tight to me because I feel like I'm one of the few of my family tree without cancer or without diabetes. You know, both of my grandparents have passed away from cancer. No one really knows where it's coming from, and that's just weird. So I'm naturally attached to the Hip Hop Caucus from just my family and just, you know, doing the entrepreneurship thing. I make sure that I keep it holistic and health and environmentally friendly. So that's why I'm with the Hip Hop Caucus.
And I just want to say it's amazing. So there's a, you know, consistently a handful of pipeline fights that need to be stopped. I know we were talking about DAPL earlier today. Keystone XL being a pinnacle one that was finally defeated after over a decade. Right now, Line 3 in Minnesota is a critical fight to be on the front lines of the Bahalia Pipeline through Memphis. This was slated to go through a poor Black community in Memphis, and their efforts to basically use eminent domain and buy rights from the folks through that community to get their pathway through the community was pretty cynical. And because the whole thing threatened the groundwater of the city of Memphis, the only city, as Jarnell was talking about, that actually gets their water from clean groundwater. And Jarnell joined in the fight, working with folks in Memphis opposing it, national folks, and within I want to say 4 weeks, the company announced that they're going to stop the project entirely, which is an amazing, to join the movement and get a win within 4 weeks is like unheard of, because these fights go on for years and years. But Valero, this company, ultimately decided to, they claim stop the development of the project because of larger global economic factors around oil use being down, and them going to pivot to other directions, and those sorts of things. Those are their talking points. But in reality, it was the community in Memphis, folks refusing to sell, and then every single barrier the community was putting up, working in concert with the city council on those sorts of things. It was just going to be way too expensive for this company to pursue this fight. And that's the power of the streets and the suites working together. And to kind of the formula that you were talking about, that Reverend Yearwood, who's our president and founder, speaks to, it's when the streets and the suites work together is when our movements win. And I would say, like this room, right? I would say we're in the suites right now. But the more that this room is connected and aligned and following the leadership of the streets, right? That's where power is built. That's where movement is built, and that's how these victories happen.
There you go. Love it. That's so impressive, man. You don't hear that in a lot of nonprofit organizations. So I'm so happy just to be a part of this organization. And one other thing I want to add to that is just knowing it was one video that really just blew my mind when I saw that right before MLK died, he said that the movement starts, and ends in Memphis. So I felt like it was my duty, not comparing myself to MLK at all. Seriously, he's a legend. But I felt like the Memphis culture had just taken a shift. And, I'm receiving a lot of backlash for being a part of the organization. So, I'm enjoying every second of it. But at the same time, I just felt like that's something that I could write in a book when I get older, that I was a part of the shift of something my ancestors had put out here. But with that being said, there's another movement called the Think 100. And, Liz is more so the leader of that. I've, listened in a few times, but could you tell us more about Think 100?
Yeah, sure. So Think 100% is Hip Hop Caucus's climate and environmental justice platform that links activism and communications, right? We need both. We need the power of storytelling and narrative, and we need the power of movement and organizing. And we need those things to align. And in climate, which is such a critical issue that impacts everyone, but impacts certain folks to greater degrees, and we have it inversed as to who the lead voices are on the issue, right? That narrative and story building work is critical. So, for example, the two clips that I showed are products and part of the process of the story building work. And then the activism work on the Bahalia Pipeline, as an example, is the activism work and the power of those things coming together. And so a few places that you can go to plug into these things. We do a weekly podcast called The Coolest Show, so absolutely encourage you to subscribe. You can find it at thecoolestshow.com, and it's also on all your regular podcasting platforms. And that's going to be voices and speakers and conversations from the front lines of the climate justice movement. We also have all kinds of calls to action and work that you can plug into by going to hiphopcaucus.org and signing up. But I think the central thing to talk about right now is Hurricane Ida, right, which has now moved its way up to a tropical storm. I think 24 folks have passed away in New York from the flooding and consequences of it. And the folks in the Gulf Coast are suffering with power isn't coming on, access to gas, food, lodging, all these sorts of things. We set up a hurricane relief fund as of a few days ago, and we're sending direct cash support to families in need. We have a team in the Gulf Coast that's identifying families and individuals in need. So that relief fund you can find at hhc.fyi/IDA, or you can text, I wrote the short cord down on my hands. You can text IDA to 66539. IDA to 66539. And we're matching donations to it right now. And we are dispersing that as cash support to families in need throughout the Gulf Coast. But that's just half of the work, is the relief work, right? And the recovery work. Then there's the advocacy and organizing and what a just recovery looks like. Louisiana, Cancer Alley, is home to petrochemical plants, oil refineries, and they were severely damaged in Ida. And they're on track to get a huge bailout for their recovery. But are the people going to get a recovery, right? And that's the question, and that will only happen. The people will only get a recovery, because the status quo is that the industry will get a recovery and the people won't, right? The only way that the people will get a recovery is if we call on those in leadership, if we organize, if we stay on it and stay involved to drive what recovery looks like post-disaster in this country. And it's something that we have to figure out, because this crisis is bringing more and stronger of these disasters every day.